Thank you for that, Olga. Hi to everybody from Scotland. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be introduced as history, which feels kind of appropriate right now. It's great to be back at 360 OS with so many old friends. One of my proudest moments recently was when we got a tip-off from an open source researcher about a possible inauthentic network, a network of coordinated inauthentic behavior. The researcher came to Facebook, we investigated, we found out that the researcher had been right, and we took down the network. That researcher was one of us. That researcher was one of the digital Sherlocks. That's the sort of thing that we had in mind when we founded the DFR Lab 5 years ago, building a community of people who'd be able to identify and expose influence operations, building the awareness and the skills to tackle influence operations. It's been 5 years since DFR Lab was born. Those 5 years have gone by in a whirl, but at the same time, it feels like a really long time because so much has changed on the way. To put it in perspective, when we founded DFR Lab, Barack Obama was still the president of the United States. Hillary Clinton was the favorite to win the 2016 election. And IRA was only an acronym for a terrorist group in Northern Ireland. So much has changed since then. But to my mind, the biggest thing is this. Everyone is now talking about influence operations, disinformation, and misinformation, although they don't always actually seem to agree on what those words mean. It's worth taking a step back to appreciate how big that change has been. When I was a freelancer studying IO in 2014 and 2015, the hardest part of the job was finding anyone who'd be interested in publishing reports about it. You could email a dozen different editors to pitch something you'd found, and none of them would reply. I actually remember in mid-2015 thinking, I'm not sure this specialization is going to last, and sketching out plans for an alternative career. I think you'll all agree that times have changed since then. And for me, the biggest thing that's changed in the field of IO is awareness. This used to be a niche subject. Now it's mainstream. There used to be only a few of us doing it. And look at us now. When I've been watching 360 over the last few days, when I've been watching the way DFR Lab and our community have expanded, I see so many friends and colleagues, friends from around the world, friends who've helped study IO and expose election interference in Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas, friends from the open source community, platforms, the media, and governments. This is a community now, and we've built it together. When I look ahead to the next 5 years, the brightest light that I see is the fact that there are so many of us doing this. And I think that one of our main goals has to be to build the community even more researchers with clearer agreed standards and procedures, and everything that will make this a fully developed field. But the thing is that awareness goes both ways. We've learned a lot about IO, but so have many other people, and not all of them have good intentions. 2016 and the aftermath weren't just a wake-up call for our community, they were a wake-up call for some threat actors, including some PR firms, political campaigns, pressure groups, and governments. These threat actors heard of IO too, and they decided that they wanted to give it a go. If you look at the pace of Facebook takedowns over the last few years, it's accelerated at dizzying speed from one network in 2017 and 20 in 2018 to 67 takedowns last year. We've done over 150 takedowns since that first one. Last month, as Nathaniel was already describing, we published a white paper on some of the main trends that emerged from that data set of Facebook takedowns. And some of those trends speak to the rising awareness among threat actors of the potential that IO represent, or at least the potential for convincing clients that IO are worth spending money on. So for example, we have seen a proliferation of activity across countries and across platforms. There have been IO exposures from over 50 countries on every continent except Antarctica. So if anyone has any leads about inauthentic behavior coming from a South Polar research station, please let us know. It would be nice to check that box. We've seen threat groups running IO on more and more platforms, not just the global ones like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, but small blogging sites, fringe forums, their own websites. My personal favorite operation, Secondary Infection, operated over at least 326 different platforms. And I'm sure that there were more that we haven't found yet. It looks like the logic was to find the soft underbelly of the internet, if you like, to post content in places where there aren't so many defenses. That says something about how it's getting harder to sustain IO on the big platforms, but it's also a reminder of how many different places IO can try to work in. We've also seen the emergence of IO as a for-hire service, influence mercenaries offering to run fake campaigns for anyone who pays. Anyone who pays in this context is not a figure of speech. We've even seen cases where one for-hire operation ran campaigns for multiple competing candidates in the same elections. And as David was saying earlier this week, that business emerged because there was a demand for it. I'd argue that the demand was driven by a perception that IO can make a big enough difference that they're worth spending money on. In many ways, that's a flawed perception because it's a lot harder to run an effective IO than many people seem to think. But the perception is out there, and the IO for hire businesses have a vested interest in perpetuating it. In a way, they're trying to run an influence operation on everyone at once, including the people who are paying them. When it comes to this general public awareness of IO, we've also seen threat actors trying to weaponize it directly by claiming that they were running massive operations when none existed. Think of the Russian IRA in November 2018. And we've seen some clues that some operations tried to factor in the fact that they might be caught and taken down to turn that into an advantage as well, or to turn it into an opportunity, trying to weaponize the fear of influence operations. We think of this as perception hacking. And in general, it's a tactic that will tend to work best when everyone's heard of the idea of IO, but nobody's really yet learned to understand them, to weigh and balance them, measure them, compare them on their merits, discuss, well, was that really effective? Was that less effective? Perception hacking is like a parasite that lives in a very particular ecological niche. It lives in that intellectual gap where people have heard enough about IO to be scared of all of them, but haven't yet learned enough to be able to judge them on their merits. Perception hacking is a particular manifestation of the journey that our community and our societies have been on in the past 5 years. This journey from a broad lack of awareness of IO to a sharp awareness of the dangers. But all the trends I talked about are underpinned by that same development. As I said, there are big questions about what effect different operations really have. But for some people, the fear or the hope is that influence operations can change the course of elections and conflicts. There are a lot of challenges ahead of us: building our community, building the standards and the disciplines of our field, building stronger deterrence against for-hire operations and political disinformation. But as I think over the last 5 years, and I look ahead to the next 5, one overarching challenge that I see is to focus on building the next stage of the collective debate, not just around awareness, but ever more around understanding, to get more and more people to move from the generalized awareness that influence operations exist to a broad, knowledgeable understanding that even though they exist, that's not a reason to panic. There are ways to expose them, disrupt them, measure them, understand them. Our societies are actually much better defended against IO now than they were in 2016. And our collective job is to make sure we keep on making the defenses better. Remember, and it is worth remembering, many of the operations that have been taken down in the last year were caught early, before they built any audience. As just one example, the Russian IRA peace data operation that was exposed in last September only had 200 English language followers when it was taken down. Just because it's an IO doesn't necessarily mean it's an effective one. We have to be able to measure and view and assess every one of these operations on its own merits. Many of you who are listening have heard me say this many times before, but as a society, we have to find that balance between keeping watchful and keeping calm. Now, I've been talking about a 5-year horizon, the 5 years since we founded DFR Lab. It's worth remembering that almost 550 years ago, William Caxton set up the first printing press in England. Printing was the information revolution of its day. It made it possible for information to circulate more freely than ever before, but it also allowed disinformation and propaganda to spread the same way. It was called a gift from heaven. It was called a work of the devil. But gradually, over many years, there came a shift from the excited awareness of printing might bring to a more familiar understanding of how it worked and what its limits were. So for me, one of the goals of our community over the next 5 years is to keep moving our societies towards that broader understanding, Yes, influence operations exist, but they're not all alike. A few build big followings and spread their stories widely, but many more are limited. Some never take off at all. There are ways to counter and deter them. There are ways to measure and understand them. There are ways to report them and communicate them. And there's a whole community, our community, which is getting better and better at doing just that. 360 OS is one of the main places where we build this community. So thank you to all of you for the last 5 years. And I'm looking forward to the next 5. And with that, I'll hand you back to the studio.